What is noblebright? Does anyone use the term hopepunk? And is Grimdark dead? Welcome to Mythic Mirror, a podcast for lovers of myth and fantasy who want to live magical, fulfilling lives. I'm your host, Mary C. Kehoe.
And I'm your co-host, Carolina Carter.
And we are exploring terms like grimdark, noblebright, dark fantasy, hopepunk. Carolina, do you want to give some definitions for these?
I do. I did have to look into some of these because I mostly apparently just read Noble Bright. Apparently that's the only thing I'm interested in. I may dabble in some hope punk. But Grimdark is kind of like I would call it no hope. You're in a morally compromised world where there's no real hero. Everyone's betraying everyone. It's violent, it's dark. There's Everybody lives in the moral gray. Um, then it's like you come up the scale a little to dark fantasy, which means there may be some like moral end goal, there may be some heroism, but it's still more like danger. There's usually some horror elements, um, but some heroism too. And then I'll let you take it over for our favorite genre, Noble Bright.
Yeah, so I started looking into this because I was trying to figure out subgenres to use for my books and figuring out what it is that I write within the epic fantasy genre. And it's funny because these terms like noble bright and hope punk, I never hear unless I'm in a conversation with another writer or I'm reading something about writing. And whereas grimdark and dark fantasy, I see actually used in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking our dear listeners, do you ever use these terms, and what terms do you use for fantasy that isn't dark but isn't cozy? So Noble Bright is, I think it was started in the academic world of describing the phase of fantasy that's coming out. So we've got grimdark, which you're exactly right. It's the dark and the violent and the morally gray. I like to think of it with so you've got the people are grim and the world is dark.
Yeah.
And then dark fantasy, you've got the people can be heroic inside of a dark world. And then noble bright leans more into it's interesting because it still has some darkness because they're still fighting things, but
Mm-hmm.
the world in general has more beauty to it. It's more uplifting, and the characters are all driven by some noble purpose or love, sacrifice, honor, some kind of morality. And it's not preachy. We're always against preachy on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's heroic. And I think a lot of fantasy used to be noble bright, and that might be why we don't have a term for it, because it's kind of the classic fantasy. You've got Lord of the Rings, where the good guys are all trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, you have flaws and characters who make mistakes, but the overall guiding principle of a character is one of a moral north star, whereas in dark fantasy or grimdark, especially grimdark but also dark fantasy, it can be more of the moral ambiguity where they have a goal but it's not necessarily a selfless one, but
Right.
you love the character anyway. I was looking at a lot of the books I've read. I did the exact same thing where I was going through my favorite books, and they were all either noble bright or dark fantasy, but with noble characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Or the setting is dark fantasy, but it's got the heart of a noble bright book.
Right. And I do feel like you said, I've seen a lot of grimdark in marketing for books these days. I do feel like they've had this moment, especially on Book Talk, of just like the main characters are not good. not good in like the morally good sense. They're morally gray or just flat out bad guys. Um, and that's had this. It's had its moment for a couple years now, and I'm wondering if people are beginning to tire.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I am, as you can see from my bookshelf. I
Right.
have
Well,
no Grimdark.
it's like it's also like the twisted fairy tales where like the rewriting of fairy tales from the villain's perspective and on the villain's side, and it's one of those things that's so fun the first time it comes out, and then
Right.
by the 25th book that comes out you're like, okay.
Yeah, the deconstruction of the fairy tale is no longer interesting to me. I don't want to know it from the villain's point of view. I think
Mhm.
to me, the moment that that specifically jumped the shark is when they did the Cruella movie. You can't,
Really?
yeah, and I know it was good. People loved it. But to me, I was like, you're making a puppy killer sympathetic.
But she
We've gone too
but she
far.
didn't kill the puppies. That was a rumor.
That's revisionist history. She killed the animals the fur she wore. I know it.
No.
Well, she was going to kill all those puppies. Those guys had clubs. They were trying.
I'm so easily influenced. Easily influenced and easily squeamish. I'm a I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the author's name, but these are huge on Book Talk of the like flipping the scenarios. I think this one, there like she wrote one called Hooked from Hook's
Hmm.
perspective,
Oh,
and
yeah,
there
yeah.
was one I think I read the Hunchback of Notre Dame one, and like and they're set in a modern time. I'm pretty sure this one is, and like in the first chapter, you have the Frollo character. He's like obviously a young hot priest. Duh. Murdering just like a random person, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. This is not.
This is the
uh,
opposite of a save the cat moment. You've murdered the
yeah, and it
cat.
was just a random. I think it was a random
Uh,
lady of the night, and I'm
oh,
just
no.
like, um,
Yeah,
I'm not for this. I'm not for this character. Am I supposed to be on this character side? It's not, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's not for me.
exactly. And that's what I was thinking when I was, because I was looking at so many of the books that I like, that I was like, oh, maybe this is, this is darker. And it will say dark fantasy, but with heroic characters. So
Hmm.
I was trying to find some books that are strictly dark fantasy or strictly grimdark.
Mm.
And the whole list had, when it had the description at the end, it's saying no redemption. It's like
Yeah.
morally bleak, violent, decay, no redemption.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would love to hear from someone who loves to read books that have no redemption, because I want to know why. What do you see in it? Because to me, the darkness is worth it because you see someone triumph over it or transform it or in some way grow, and there's hope. So, yeah. Why the no redemption?
Like our sign, I was thinking of our sign off that it's not always easy, but no good story ever is. I was like, oh, that's a very noble, bright sign off. Why? What would our sign off be in these other genres like Grimdark? It's not
Oh, good
always
question.
easy. It's never worth it, and it will never get better. Thanks for listening. And then like dark fantasy is like it's never easy. I don't know. Is that, is that it? And then Hopepunk is like sometimes it's hard, but that's okay.
Sometimes it's hard, but we'll get through it together.
Yes. Just
Let's see,
which
for
is fine.
dark fantasy would be, it will never be easy, but it'll be worth it if I'm with you.
Oh yeah, there we go. Oh Lord. I I think I can dabble into the darkness a little more than you. Like I think I enjoy pain a little more than you do. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but just based on the books I've tried to make you read and that you're like, am I going to like this? And I'm like, You're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it.
I will say my tolerance for that has gone way down. Uh, I think I was way more into those books because some of them I introduced you into. Some of the series that I
It's
haven't
true.
finished, I got you into.
Hmm.
And then I will say, I think it happened when I worked for the nonprofit that was, raising awareness about child trafficking and really taking a hard look at that world and the reality of this world and the darkness that happens in this world. I no longer have interest. It's hard. It takes a lot for me to be interested in a book that has that level of darkness in it. 'Cause it's like, if I'm
Hmm.
looking at this, I might as well be looking at the real world and trying to fix it. Like, I want to
Yeah.
escape and feel
Right.
better and learn something so that then I can come back to this world and try to help.
Or
And
yeah,
sometimes,
something that can fuel you to come back to your life with strength instead of draining you.
yeah, and I don't mean that, it has to be all rainbows and, and starlight.
Hmm.
But because I think we do grow and it is cathartic and we do learn and yeah, gain strength from going through hard things with characters. It's just there for me. There has to be a balance of, it's like a scale of the hardness and the violence versus beauty and wonder and people making heroic choices. And if it tends to go a little this way, that's when I put the book down. Or if I just feel like too emotionally drained and I'm like, oh, I'll come back to this later.
Yeah, well, and because as I was reading through these and thinking about books, I was also thinking about the world we live in and feeling it feels a bit grim dark. And like, what do you do about that? How do you bring noble bright into a grim dark world? Which brought me to the question about these genres: is it the world itself, or is it the character's response to the world that makes the genre?
That's a good question. I think it's both because I think a lot of, and I think it is a sliding scale because if you have a very a world that has a lot of violence, it could be a grim dark world. But if you have a character that has hope and believes in change and actually, and through the plot, and the plot supports that something they do does work out and it isn't just breaking them down,
Hmm.
that's bringing in the nobility. So I guess that would be where the dark fantasy is. I think that's where a lot of that sits, is where you have a heroic or a good character, or at least someone who learns to care about someone else. In the beginning, they might be a morally gray character, but through the course of the book, they learn to be selfless, or they learn to care about other people more than themselves, which is what selflessness means.
Sure, I've heard that.
In the research I was doing, people were calling the Way of Kings noble bright
Hmm.
because of how his characters are so driven by some honor or moral code, which I would agree with. But then you do have war taking place, and especially like in the first book with the, I don't know if you've read The Way of Kings, but in the first book, it's it's grim. the
Yeah.
the environment that the main character is terrible, and it's hopeless. Part of that story is him gaining some kind of hope and some kind of resolve to change things as much as he can. And I guess that's the moment, if it was a grimdark book, that never would happen, and it would just be him surviving. I don't know, I don't read them. You can have the darkness even in a noble bright, but it's just the scales. You see more of the beauty and wonder and hero, heroism. There it is. Heroism.
Heroism. Dealing with City of Brass because that's obviously in Kingdom of Copper what we've been reading most recently. I was feeling like it was kind of like noble bright characters set in a dark fantasy world where it's like they do keep trying. They do have these moral compasses inside and these good intentions, but everything just keeps going wrong.
Mhm.
Would you agree?
I would. And I would say
Good, good, excellent.
to me, I think well, that's not true. I feel like Hot Set might be a noble bright character too, underneath her what everyone
Mystery.
thinks she is. Um so yeah, because I think the king, the erstwhile king,
Hmm.
and uh Meniza are not noble bright characters. I think
No.
um Muntadir is when push comes to shove.
Yeah, and on the other end of the spectrum, the hope punk. I think hope punk reminds me of like an autumnal evening, like what you would want on like a Anna Green Gables book. Or
Mm.
I haven't read that one. You might have. I know one of our sisters has the Legends and Lattes
Oh
fantasy
yeah.
book,
Yeah.
that or House by the Cerulean Sea. Like just what you want when you want to curl up and just be cozy.
Mm. Ah, so you're thinking Hope Punk is cozy fantasy.
That's yeah. Or you like I had a great example of Ted Lasso. Is like I really have you watched that?
Not yet.
Oh,
I know I need to.
I feel like it's a really good example of hope punk. He faces great adversities, and his act of hope and kindness is a rebellion. It is the
Mhm.
strong, hard
Mhm.
thing to do, time and
Mhm.
time again. He's like the ultimate example of turning the other cheek, and you're so like, ah, just get up and fight, punch him, and then you realize like well, we're gonna have to watch it now. I didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
I had all these examples. I haven't seen it, so I'm just gonna.
That sounds like a perfect example, and that is what I was going to say. The difference, what I see the difference between cozy fantasy and hope punk would be the stakes.
Hmm.
And I don't know that cozy fantasy. Can you have a morally gray cozy fantasy character, a protagonist? Probably not.
Let us know what you think in the comments.
Yeah,
Hang on, let me think. Morally gray.
not
Who are you
really.
thinking of?
I
Oh, you do
wasn't.
have some.
No, I didn't.
I'm looking over at my books.
Oh, I'm looking at my fish tank. It's not helping.
I don't have anything
um,
to say.
they're ignoring me.
Crime and punishment. Obviously, cozy fantasy.
Cozy
Morally gray lead.
fantasy. I mean, because they have stakes, but it never. I mean, because cozy fantasy has enough stakes to keep things interesting, but it's not.
Hmm.
You don't. You don't think anyone's gonna die.
Would you put the Redwall series in the cozy fantasy thing, or would you? I mean, because it's actually quite dark.
Yeah, that's an interesting series because it nails cozy, but it also nails violence quite well.
I would
People
almost put
die,
it in the
there's
dark
war.
fantasy genre because it is, again, you are getting a real sense of my tolerance levels if that's dark fantasy for me. But just because, it is shockingly violent at times.
I think it's see, and this is where things don't quite all fit into these subgenres because it's definitely epic fantasy. It's violent, but it doesn't have like the atmosphere isn't dark.
Right.
It's a happy world until there's it's like nature. He did a great
Hmm.
job of of capturing that because it is cozy and happy and there's beauty going on, and then there are these moments of real violence and death, and then they move through it.
Yeah.
But it's not like they don't have a tyrant controlling the world. They don't, there's not this dark control, which I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of dark fantasy has. It's like the world itself, the system that the characters have to live in is dark. Like, what's the book? Okay, the book you just gave me that I read with the vampires. What's the name of that one?
Something Fallen
The
Kiss of
Serpent and the
Dusk.
Crown.
Yeah.
Something like that.
By Carissa Broadbent.
Yeah.
Almost there. Welcome to the ASMR portion of our podcast where we look up books by Carissa Broadbent.
I do hear it.
Which you do need to read the Daughter of No World series. We need to read it on here.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
I believe you.
Mary, I am telling you. The Serpent and the Wings of Night.
That was close. So, in The Serpent and the Wings of Night, you have, I would consider that a dark fantasy with only one noblebright character.
What?
Mm-hmm. I think
Only
she
one?
becomes, I would say she becomes a noblebright character. But
What about hymns?
I think he would be the one I'd say from the beginning is a noblebright character.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What about his friend?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about her.
Mish. Mish is almost a Hopepunk character placed in a dark fantasy world, is what I would say.
That's true. That's
my
true.
hot take.
So we've got a Hopepunk character, a noblebright character, and a dark fantasy character in a dark fantasy world.
In a vampire world.
Yeah.
I love those books. I'm always like, skip. It's hard to be me.
I think that is such a great example of clearly dark fantasy because the goddess, at least in the first book, I don't know what happens in the rest of the series, but the goddess herself, the one that has created this entire world, thrives on violence. She has created the event that honors her the most is one where lots of vampires die and they're killing each other off. And I was wondering, is this something that the priesthood is just creating and they use her as a way to control people? And this is really like the priesthood doing this. And then she appears at the end. So feels like she's for it.
Yeah, I think she likes it.
Yeah. So to me, that's when the ultimate powerful being, the goddess of this world, is herself one that thrives on violence. That's a pretty good indicator of dark fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is, just in general, when you have a religious system where the god or goddess of that world is like a morally gray character, I'm always like, okay, we are in the bad place now.
Yeah, that's funny. I did feel like that with, I mean, usually you see fallen angels and demons. That's more of like a urban fantasy thing. But I was reading that book thinking, so this is what happens when a fallen angel rules the world. And like as a goddess, this is what happens.
You want vampires? This is how you get vampires.
This is how you get vampires. And you feel for when you learn her story. Like, she sounds like the rest of the gods aren't great either. She escaped. But then this is the world she created.
Yeah.
It's like all of her pain externalized into a world.
Yeah, when the gods just need to go to therapy. It's when you know you're in dark fantasy.
I want that to be a title of a book.
People. Yeah.
When the gods just need to go to therapy.
You can't torture people just because you're sad.
Exactly. Is it time for the Discworld Delight?
I think it is. So far, all guesses are Mort.
That is correct.
Even without the names, Mary.
Even without the names. They're good.
Mm-hmm. When you're good, you're good.
For this week's Discworld Delight, are you ready? Victor stared at the card. Thank you, he said vaguely. Are you a wizard? Silverfish glared at him. Whatever made you think that? He snapped. You're wearing a dress with magic symbols. Magic symbols? Look closely, boy. These are certainly not the credulous symbols of a ridiculous and outmoded belief system. These are the badges of an enlightened craft whose clear new dawn is just dawning. Magic symbols, he finished, in tones of withering scorn. And it's a robe, not a dress, he added. What is that from?
So, your book, where would you
Mm-hmm.
place your upcoming novel in this situation?
I would say Noblebright for sure.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Uh, yeah, even though the gods are lost, they that was something I actually was focusing on quite a bit for the series. What does it look like to have gods who aren't morally gray? And
Mm.
what does that world look like? And how do you have adventure still and threats? One thing that is kind of is easier when you have a gods who have flaws because then they can be part of the external threat.
And it feels more legendary, like more like Norse mythology, more like Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, where they are. I don't think in any of those, like, those are all very flawed gods who are creating chaos and mayhem on the earth with humans. They're not, and people still pray to them. They still, sometimes they do good thing, sometimes they do a bad thing. You never know what you're gonna
Hmm.
get, and that does create the stories that we know today that are in our like mythos of
Yeah.
our mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would agree with you that it's like the gods for some of these ancient cultures sit in the same kind of place as where nature and the fairy world sat for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Europe and the UK, where it could be bad, it could be good, depends on what you do, and and it depends on how
And
they
what mood they're
feel.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what mood they're in. And then I was thinking, I got caught up thinking about the Egyptian gods.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like some of them were someone. I need an Egyptologist on the line.
Yes.
Because I feel like some of them were, you had good and you had chaotic.
Well, yeah, I would say it's sort of
I mean,
in
I
the
guess you could.
same vein as like in Norse mythology, you have mischief gods, you
Hmm.
have
Now Norse is
hearth.
interesting. Yeah, Norse is interesting because it seems when you actually read the myths, they don't have a lot to do with humans. Whereas Greeks,
Yeah.
they're dealing with humans all the time, with
Intermingling.
intermingling, you might say. Uh,
Yeah,
the Norse are mostly just fighting the ice giants, and
they got their own
humans
thing going on.
are kind of involved sometimes, but yeah, you don't hear about them at all, really.
And it's true, it's been a long time since I read my big Egyptology book, with the red diamond ruby on it. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I feel like they weren't. I don't know. They did have their own thing going on, and mostly the biggest takeaway for me was getting your heart weighed after you died
Yeah,
on the scale.
yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah. From what I recall, I mean, the Egyptian gods. There's a vast array of them. So you have, and a vast array of time in which humans believed. So you have different versions of these gods. But I do remember some of them being more like Isis. I don't remember her being capricious
No, it was
or Horus.
Osiris's brother, right? Because Osiris is the one. His brother tears him apart. Isis finds all the pieces and brings him back to life.
You said
Or
his brother?
Ra.
No, no,
Is it
that is
Ra who gets?
Osiris. No, no,
Okay.
that's Osiris. You're right. He's the god that, dies and comes back. The
Hmm.
dying god myth, one of my favorites.
I know.
Back to subgenres.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all right. We're talking, that's within the genre of our podcast, is myth. Woo, we're
Thank
all right.
God.
So I've only read the beginning of this book, so I don't have an opinion on it so much. I have a guess. Where does the invisible life of Addie LaRue sit on this scale?
I would say dark fantasy. But not for me in my reading of it. It was dark fantasy in almost a cozy way where, and I do feel that there are very noble bright moments in it.
Just from the beginning, it didn't feel it's it has this almost sad poetic atmosphere to it rather than
Mhm.
what I consider dark fantasy.
It's very poetic and
Mhm.
achingly lonely,
Mhm.
almost meditative in its loneliness.
I feel like a lot of fantasy right now is the kind that just grips you and doesn't let go, and you go through all these heartbreaking, huge things, especially romantasy. And I'm not against these things. It keeps you reading, and I've read plenty of books late into the night because you can't put it down. Um, and so it's interesting to read one that's coming out right now or that came out recently that has that exactly what you said, this aching loneliness and this everything about it just has this poetic flow to it. And I really loved every page I read. And then I was like, but I'm sad. Uh, I think also I was like, I need to read this when I'm happier so that I can like shake off the feeling a little bit easier. But maybe not. Maybe I just need to like let it, move through.
I mean, that is, I have some rules regarding music and books. I'm not allowed to listen to Lana Del Rey in the winter.
Mm.
Some are self-imposed, some are others around me have given me these rules. They can't bear to live with me if I'm get too down. Although sometimes it's fun to like dig into it, just like on a dark winter's night, reading a dark, sad tale.
Yeah. I like to read the Winter's Night trilogy when it's dark and cold. But again,
Hmm.
that has um hope and change and redemption and
Yeah,
love and sacrifice. So again, Mary's leaning toward the noble bright, even in her dark Russian winter.
we just need it.
Here we do.
So speaking of things we need, Mary, what was your spark of the week?
I had one. Oh yeah. My spark of the week was seeing the bluebirds come home. We've got robins and bluebirds that come
Oh,
every year.
wow.
How about you?
Very similarly, going on walks and seeing the daffodils come up and all the little spring flowers spring through and feeling the breezes and the winds that are just a little bit warmer.
Nice. Yay.
Spring is
Springtime.
springing.
Which is perfect because we are right at spring equinox. Noble
So
bright
perfect.
on
Noble
spring
bright spring
equinox.
equinox.
Thank you for chatting with us about all the subgenres. No, we only talked about a few subgenres, but we'll explore more later. And for our noble bright ending. Oh, wait, first, before we do that,
Yeah.
if you're enjoying this show, give it a like, give it a share. It really helps other people find it. And we would love to grow our community of myth and fantasy lovers.
And if you haven't yet, download Mary's short story, Rueful but Unruled, on her website, maryckehoe.com, as we prepare for the launch of her first novel.
Oh, or did you want me to say the title? First novel, Breaking Inlands. And if you want to be a part of the launch, click the link below to join the Kickstarter. And we are so grateful to be spiraling through this universe with all of you. It's not always easy, but no good story ever is.